Welcome to the BMIT series on the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or better known as DORA. If you work in the financial services sector, I doubt you have not heard of DORA. And set to come into force in 2025, this piece of legislation targets organizations in the financial sector. However, its principles of IT governance, risk management, cybersecurity, resilience building are crucial for every business in today's digital age. In this series, we'll be addressing various topics related to DORA, but also exploring a little bit beyond the financial sector. Today, I have with me Galea, Product Manager at BMIT, and Dione Vella, who is Chief Digital and Compliance Officer. And in this video, we are going to tackle a very interesting topic, which is IT governance. Now, DORA mandates stringent governance requirements to ensure that organizations are resilient, well managed, and compliant with regulatory standards. Dione, first of all, thank you for joining us today, Ivan as well. My first question is more fundamental in nature. What are the core components of effective IT governance?
Thank you, David. I think the core components, starting from the most important ones, would be buy-in from management. So the endorsement of the management of the organization to be compliant and to increase the compliance with respect to the IT infrastructure. The second, very closely related to this, and it's a topic close at heart, to be honest with you, is the culture. I do believe that top management drive, or they have a very important role to play into the culture of the organization. But effectively, everyone needs to be on board. So the third element would be people. Having everyone understanding that by implementing IT governance, we are doing it to safeguard the business, to safeguard the customer, and ultimately to safeguard all our jobs. Because if the business is flourishing and the business is growing, we are growing with the business. Then obviously there are the technicalities. They're having the necessary controls, measurement, training, continuous training, because the threat landscape is changing out there. So we need to continuously train our people to adapt, understand what are the risks, and ultimately learn how they can help an organization prevent incidents from happening. So I think for any effective as such governance, irrespective of IT or any other governance within the organization or the industry, I think those would be the core components for any framework to work.
When we talk about, Ivan, this is probably for you. When we talk about risk management, for example, we have certain frameworks that we follow. When it comes to IT governance, what is an IT governance framework? In relation, an IT governance framework, how can it be implemented? What are the components of that? What is the approach an organization needs to take?
Well, first of all, I agree with what Dione said. The top-down approach, all right, from management, and it's, I think, the first, you can say, Article 5 from DORA, which is IT governance, and we're seeing a big shift, not just from the European legislation, but even from in global standards. NIST in February, as you know, launched their version 2 framework, and in the heart of their framework, they put governance. So finally, and I liked one, I attended one webinar, and one of the host said, like, is it finally, put the question out there, is it finally the moment where organizations or enterprises are going to start taking IT governance more seriously? So yeah, it's I think it's been long due to start seeing a little bit more emphasis on IT governance. When we talk about what IT governance is made up of, I mean, mostly it's policies, processes, procedures, and so forth. Some core policies, for example, would be the security policy. That comes to mind. There's the data management policy, business continuity and disaster recovery policies. The acceptable use policy, which is more sort of an HR policy, but at the same time a human resources policy, but there's the element, the IT element in it, right? And most importantly, another important policy would be the incident management policy. But there are other policies which some organizations might want to prioritize. There's change management, for example. So I think there's about up to 20. I think even DORA mentions up to 20 communication policies. I mean, some of these policies can even be grouped into a single policy or in a way. But anyways, it's just how the organization wants to address these policies. And building the framework is investing, training, visibility, the awareness of these policies and processes, testing of these policies and processes, reviewing these policies and processes, and so forth.
Dione, we talk about alignment within an organization. So you have corporate governance on the one hand, and then you have IT governance. Now, Ivan mentioned, obviously, he mentioned that finally IT governance is sort of being given the importance it deserves. How do we align IT governance with corporate governance within an organization? How do they relate to each other?
They relate a lot to each other. IT is an enabler to the business. IT, it's not... I am coming to mind IT crowd. The IT people living, their office was in the minus what level of the building, living on their own. No, IT is not that. IT is the tool, is the part of the machine that is enabling an organization to sell their products, to grow their business. So that is where things needs to align. It's starting first with the understanding that the IT is an enabler of the business, it's not a cost. And see how we can leverage, especially nowadays in the big data world, in the AI world that is coming along. How can we leverage assets that we always had, but we never used, because we never thought that they are valuable to the business? And that is where IT plays a role, is not just keeping the email running, not just keeping the database or the application running, but also leveraging these other assets, which we are now realizing that we have, to be able to further grow our business. So that is where it starts.
In fact, if we look at DORA, one of the requirements is to have someone within the organization who is responsible for compliance, ensuring that all the requirements are met. How important is it that you mentioned the board, you mentioned management? So what DORA is almost ensuring is that the CFO, the CCO, the CEO, and the CISO are talking the same language, finally.
Yes. So everyone in every organization, everyone needs to contribute. Someone needs to spearhead the project. Okay? So this accountable person is there to ensure that the process of compliance is happening. He is not the person accountable for a particular procedure to be implemented correctly or to be written correctly. He is there to oversee that the overall compliance of the organization is effectively working. This is not a new concept. In 2018, GDPR introduced the concept of DPO. So assigning an owner to personal information, because someone needs to have visibility of overall what is happening within the organization in that respect with personal data. In this respect of the compliance programs.
So it's very important to have that individual who's overseeing everything. But how do you measure the effectiveness of your IT governance? What are the key, I wouldn't say numbers, but there must be, what are the elements that ensure that what you are doing is actually effective?
So you start off again with your risk assessment. You start off by understanding what you're doing, how you're doing it, what are your risks. Once that has been identified, then you apply a risk mitigation strategy. So part of that strategy can be that you implement controls, but it's useless that you have controls without measurement. So you need then to continue measuring what you are doing, how you are doing it, then to proceed to the continuous improvement part, to be able to assess, take stock, and see what you can change to be able to further improve. The measurement can be internal, so you can appoint someone within the organization to be measuring. Ideally, the implementer is not who is measuring, because you cannot audit yourself.
Conflict of interest.
But it can work. It depends on, again, the how big is the organization, how much they are ready to invest. You can outsource auditing. You can have your external, internal auditor that will do these verifications for you and give you a report. So there are various ways and means. What is important here is the measurement element.
You can measure through training, for example. We do the awareness program, train, understanding, test the employees, how much they are aware of that particular IT governance. Testing of plans. When you introduce IT governance, there's also the element of plans. When we talked about business continuity and disaster recovery, for example, you have to have plans in place, right? You identify the risks, the scenarios, then implement the plans. You need to test those plans. You need to see how effective they are, those plans. That's a method of measurement, for example, right? And even when you execute these plans, we talk about communication plans. Was it effective during an incident? Even incidents themselves are measured as a source of measurement, because if you have an incident, you want to know how fast you were able to recover, if the plans are correct. Did you meet your RTO? Did you, is your RPO effective? These are the sort of measurements that, in a way, show you how effective the IT governance is. And this goes to the benefits of IT governance, right? Because these are part of such plans, etc. And the measurements is what makes IT governance, important within an organization.
Let me give you an example. And this is not about a particular threat. Technology fails. We know that technology fails. One important parameters, you mentioned RTO, RPO. I also mentioned MTTR, MTBF. How many times is a particular system failing? How much time is taking me to recover? So conducting analysis on this sort of data will help you analyze, do I have a root cause analysis? Do I have a chronic problem with this application?
This is where service management comes in, incident management, problem management.
Exactly. Where is the origin of this problem? What can I do to resolve that? Because this is costing me so much downtime. So all these are parameters that you can use to be able to continue improving on your performance at the end of the day.
But this also means that the IT team within the organization needs to be trained as well. I think one of the challenges is that many a time you have IT teams who do not have this background to understand the requirements, to understand what they need to be looking at. Even just looking at security in general, they struggle to apply security. So how you mentioned training and you mentioned culture. How should we be looking at training IT teams within the context of IT governance? How important is that?
It is definitely important. You need to look at governance not just from the security point of view. There are many frameworks and there are many training opportunities available today. So Ivan rightly so mentioned ITIL. ITIL is another framework which is not a security framework. It's a service management framework, but for IT it's crucial. It's crucial, I would say, as much as the security framework, because ITIL gives you the foundations to be able to, for example, implement changes within your infrastructure, which then, if implemented properly or implemented wrongly, they may affect downtime.
But just having an understanding of what service management is can already be a big plus to that individual and the organization. I mean, having the know-how of service management, incident management, change management, it's already, you're hammering that information down in your head. And when you're tackling an issue, an incident, or tackling an event or whatever, you're going to have these things in the back of your head. So that is the type of training.
That is where also culture comes into play.
Exactly. Yeah.
Culture gives you, what is culture? At the end of the day, it is how we do things here. And if you are trained to tackle things in a particular way, the industry today mentions security left-hand approach. So moving security to the left. That means starting with security. So, and if the culture of the organization, you build this culture within the organization to start with security, then things will come easier. Us coming from the technology world is a no-brainer. We need to continue training our staff because technology is evolving. And that is where perhaps a business whose core business is not IT, then leveraging MSPs can help them on that front, because MSPs are in their vested interest to continue training their people to always be upfront with technology.
In fact, BMIT does address this as well. It is something, if an organization has to be compliant with DORA, since obviously the topic is DORA, but there are many other requirements. BMIT can help and provide the assistance they need.
One thing, go a little step backwards. DORA asks for an awareness program. Now, and training does not specify what type of training, does not specify what type of awareness program that the organization needs to implement within the entity. However, it is stating that they need to identify the roles, identify the teams, okay, specifically the critical functions, okay, and have appropriate training for these teams. So if an entity just goes and does the normal security awareness training, it might not be sufficient for the entire organization or for specific teams. And that's why we can also help entities when it comes to, for example, training their IT resources, because there is a specific need or a specific skill that the 101 training about security awareness is not sufficient. We go a little bit more in depth when it comes to awareness training. Even, for example, when it comes to developing code, specific awareness on securing code. there are various trainings, obviously, that BMIT can provide, but that the entity need to be aware of or need to implement when it comes to the awareness program that DORA is rightfully asking for.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dione. Thank you, Ivan. And very informative, very interesting. Looking forward to future videos. Thank you.
Thank you.